Hey, this is Pastor Bunjee Garrett, and I want to take this opportunity to present you with another word of encouragement. Well, here we go. It was yesterday morning when Moscow launched a major wave of airstrikes on dozens of cities all across Ukraine. According to one report, at least 83 missiles were fired on the country, with 43 of them being downed by Ukraine's armed forces. And knowing that there are many civilians all across Ukraine who are now suffering, in the aftermath of this attack, we ought to be praying for those who are currently caught in the middle of this conflict. Now, in an attempt to justify this attack, Putin's informed the world that this series of strikes on Ukraine's energy and military commands and communication facilities, it's actually an act of revenge for what he calls Kiev's long track record of terrorist actions, which clearly includes last Saturday's bridge blast. It was just last Saturday when a Ukrainian truck driver was hired to transport fertilizer, which took him on a delivery route across Putin's bridge that connects Russia and Crimea. What he probably didn't know was that his truck was wired with explosives, which are believed to have been installed by a Ukrainian special ops unit. As a matter of fact, it was Saturday evening after the bridge was blown up when an anonymous Ukrainian official confirmed the Russian reports that Ukraine was behind the truck bomb attack on that bridge, which killed at least 3 civilians. The security service of Ukraine also informed its Telegram audience that the bridge beautifully burns. And an advisor to Zelensky, well, he informed his Twitter followers, and I quote here, "Everything illegal must be destroyed. Everything that is stolen must be returned to Ukraine. Everything occupied by Russia must be expelled." As we consider this current conflict between Russia and Ukraine, well, we must not fail to remember that Ukraine was actually part of Russia until the early 90s. As a matter of fact, it was back in 1991 when the Ukrainians voted to establish their independence from the Soviet Union. And while the West was quick to celebrate the end of the Soviet Union, we must not fail to remember that it was just 50 years earlier, in 1941, when Nazi soldiers attacked the Soviet Union by opening the Eastern Front. And they did this as they invaded Ukraine and established the Third Reich right there in Kiev. Sadly, many Ukrainians were happy to embrace the Nazis, and one reason why is because they were suffering from the policies of the Russian Social Democratic Party, better known as the Bolsheviks. And after suffering starvation created by the socialistic policies of Lenin's far-left revolutionary Marxist fashion, the Ukrainians soon discovered that the socialistic policies of Hitler, they weren't any better than the socialistic policies of Lenin. And I guess if there's any lesson that we can learn from the history of Ukraine, it's that socialism will always result in starvation and suffering. Well, as we consider the conflict that has impacted this land for many, many years, we shouldn't be surprised to learn that Ukraine is completely divided between those who want to be a part of Russia and those who don't. And while those who insist that Ukraine is independent from Russia, Vladimir Putin is equally convinced that Russians and Ukrainians are one in the same. And listen, he's so completely convinced about this that he's ready to engage in full-scale war in order to protect this Donbas region, which was actually called the heart of Russia back in 1921. And now that the people in that area of Ukraine have apparently voted to rejoin Russia, Putin has sworn to protect these people and these borders by every means available. And the chances are this campaign that unfolded yesterday, it's just the beginning. As a matter of fact, the commander-in-chief who's in charge of this Russian campaign, it's an army general who's the commander of the aerospace forces, and he's a widely respected leader there in Russia who is also known as General Armageddon. Wow, that's his nickname, General Armageddon. Not only that, but Russia's Security Council deputy chairman has also assured the world that this is just the beginning of their response. And here's how he put it, and I quote, "The first episode is over. There will be others. I will express my personal position. The Ukrainian state in its current configuration with the Nazi political regime will pose a constant, direct, and clear threat to Russia. Therefore, in addition to protecting our people and protecting the country's borders, the goal of our future actions should be a complete dismantling of the political regime of Ukraine." Wow. Now, in light of this goal, we can be certain that full-scale war, it's inevitable. And what this means is that the threat of nuclear war is every day increasing. As a matter of fact, it was just Sunday when Elon Musk shared his perspective on Twitter. And he did this by declaring, and I quote, nuclear war probability is rising rapidly. That's right. If both sides of this conflict continue to escalate their response, well, then a nuclear conflict is inevitable. And with that being the case, you might be interested to know that President Biden, he's promised to send advanced air defense systems to the Ukrainians. And the UK's foreign secretary has also informed the Daily Express that the UK is going to strengthen its unwavering support of Ukraine as they see this through to the end. And as we consider how everything is now escalating, well, it seems to me that the globalists are now playing chicken with nuclear weapons, over a small region of Ukraine, which was once a part of Russia and now apparently wants to return. And while we ought to be praying for the Ukrainian civilians who are caught in the middle of this conflict, we should also be praying for cooler heads to prevail, on the geopolitical front. And especially after the tweet that the Selective Service System here in America just sent out on Friday. Now, just to be clear, the Selective Service System, or SSS for short, this is the agency that registers men between the ages of 18 and 25 who are U.S. citizens or are immigrants living in the U.S. The Selective Service System is also responsible for running the draft. Anytime our military needs more men to go fight a war. Here's the tweet that they just sent out this past Friday, and I quote it. Parents, if your son is an only son and the last male in your family to carry the family name, he is still required to register with SSS. Wow. Is the SSS getting ready to draft our sons? With this question in mind, I'll remind you that it was last week when I told you about the failed recruiting goals for 2022. And in case you missed it, the Army is currently 25% short of its recruitment goal for this year. And this is at a time when Biden seems to be getting us ready for a war there in Ukraine. And with that, I have to ask, is it possible that he's preparing to send off our sons to go and die in this region of Europe that has been fought over for many, many years? With this question in mind, I want to remind you that the midterm elections are less than a month away. And with that being the case, it's crucial that we turn Biden into a lame duck leader by taking back the House and the Senate away from the warmongers who love to profit from these never-ending wars. And while we should certainly pray for the people there in Ukraine, we should also pray for our leaders to walk in the wisdom of the Lord so that we can lead a quiet and a peaceable life. And just to be clear, I like the way that Paul put it in Romans chapter 12. It's there where he declares, if it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. Beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. Therefore, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him a drink. For in so doing, you will heap coals of fire on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Would it be to God that we would elect leaders who want to overcome evil with good? And I pray that we would elect leaders who truly embrace this biblical truth. And with this as our hope, let's vote for leaders who prefer peace over the profits that come from never-ending wars. At the same time, let's make sure that we are those believers who realize that our battle is not against flesh and blood. No, instead, we're at war with a spiritual enemy who has blinded the eyes of every unbeliever. With that being the case, we need to learn how to use the sword of the Spirit as we preach the gospel message of Jesus Christ. And in this way, we fight the good fight of faith, and all for the glory of God.